Even though I'm highly convinced that God is real, I'm essentially agnostic because I'm not 100% certain. I don't know if there's a God, and the more I think about it, the more I realise I don't know anything at all. The best anyone ever has is a strong subjective impression or a strong subjective probability. I have a strong subjective impression that I exist, and it seems that you do too, although you and I might not essentially be separate. It's probably the thing that I'm most certain about, but not completely, never completely. There are many different things that people mean by God. Paul Tillich talks about God as the potential from which being or experience arises. He uses the example of waves versus the ocean. Waves are the beingness that rise from and fall back into the ocean, which is the ground of being. I would sprinkle in a bucket of panpsychism to that, making the ocean being as well as the waves. There is some kind of experience that it's like to be a wave, to be the entire ocean and, well, everything. For me, everyone and everything's collective and individual experience is God, expressions of the same ocean. Consciousness is the realest thing about reality. It is omnipresent, and that is God. This is endless experience and endless process. Since it is more likely to me that there is a God than that there isn't, many people would take this to mean I believe in God. But since I cannot categorically know, I can only be agnostic. I shall dub this personal made-up philosophy pan-beingism. I don't think of God so much as a creator, as creation is a process which implies a beginning and a separate entity that creates. That being said, us humans have the experience of creating, and it's really important to our well-being. There is a subjective sense that conscious choice helps shape outcomes, that in being conscious we make active choices. At my most skeptical, I would say that this is an astoundingly meaningful game. At my most affirming, I would say that it is astoundingly meaningful because choice is a fundamental choreography that shapes reality. There is growing evidence that nature consciously chooses, not necessarily instead of, but in addition to, the more passive view held by natural selection. Even Darwin considered that sexual selection depends at least partially on subjective preference and choice, that evolution of entire species is influenced by these choices. He observed male satin bowerbirds decorating their bowers with specific blue objects. Female bowerbirds then selected their mate significantly influenced by her favourite bower. This choice influences the evolution of male brains and the colour of their feathers. If God is everything and everyone, God must also be creation itself. Either that or the simulation of creation. The result is the same. Creation certainly feels godly. It brings with it a strong sense of fulfillment. Since to me God is everything and everyone, and God seems to be endlessly and actively self-developing, I suppose this would make me a pan-beingist, pragmatic self-developist. I've had many experiences where I'm acutely aware of being and of consciousness as limitless and eternal. You may have too. They can be comforting or frightening experiences, and they can vary in intensity. This is one manifestation of self-transcendence which can deeply transform us and the lives we lead for the better. However, self-transcendence is not without risk, so getting support and guidance, such as from a therapist who has at least some understanding of this phenomenon, can really maximize the potential benefit. Kundalini is an ancient Hindu description, map and guide for non-ordinary, yet surprisingly common, spiritual experience and process. It has stood the test of time, and it appears to map out something that many people experience. It seems to also apply to those who have prior knowledge of Kundalini and those who don't. A Kundalini experience typically includes movement of energy and emotion in the body, often through the spine and often intensely. The direction of flow travels upwards from the base of the spine to the crown and can be interrupted by blockages representing the release of psychological stress or unresolved trauma, for example. This can be accompanied by spontaneous movements and shaking, changes in temperature, altering mental states, release of emotion and meaningful insights. These symptoms can subside suddenly or gradually once any blockages are released and enter in a calmer, more consistent being. Temporality is baked into the Kundalini experience. It's a process of travel through many states, with an end that is very different to the beginning. I believe in the power of and have deep respect for a force of nature called Kundalini, because I've witnessed and accompanied people going through these intense symptoms. Experiences have frequently expressed a sense of expansive and unitive awareness and consciously needing to let go in alignment with my pan-beingist, pragmatic, self-developist stance. There is a growing culture within or adjacent to yoga that actively aims to induce Kundalini experiences, and with it comes a romanticism for the orgasmic sensations and transcendental experiences that it appears to offer. Indeed, for some people that is how it is, but for many others, euphoria is experienced intermittently with overwhelm and a sense of being adrift. Again, for some, this may not be unpleasant and perhaps is the aim. This is to allow these feelings or energies to exist without resisting or fighting them. However, romanticism can have a tendency to omit these possibilities from the sales brochure. They don't look quite as good. This is why I think it's important not to sensationalize Kundalini. The profound answers generally boil down to balance, honest reflections, and appreciating the rough in equal measure with the smooth. The dark night of the soul is associated with a vacuum of meaning, purpose, identity, and/or values, a sense of emotional pain, and an internal death. It comes from a poem written by San Juan de la Cruz in the 16th century. Much like the Kundalini process, it is temporary, characterized by God abandoning the experiencer before they are transformed. The implication being that the sense of abandonment is an important part of the process. In order to see this process through, the experiencer allows themselves to be passively purified. Once again, we see a redefinition of the boundaries of meaning and notably identity, as if suddenly the familiar is pulled from under the feet. New experiences and notions of who you can be emerge, but perhaps after a period of unsettling confusion. This seems to overlap with the before and after of Kundalini unblocking. A dark night of the soul seems to suggest that it is singular. However, where the Kundalini process may involve the unblocking of multiple traumatic or stressful clusters. After abandonment from God, there is a oneness with God and an importance of letting go. Again, suggestive of my pan-beingist, pragmatic, self-developist stance. A psychedelic crisis is a spiritual crisis of the type that's introduced through ingestion of a psychedelic drug or through another means of initiation, like through breath work or meditation. As I explain in another video, psychedelic crises seem to be, if not identical, closely related to spiritual crises. Similarly to Kundalini and Dark Night of the Soul, psychedelic crises can bring with them ego dissolution, a dissolving of identification with perceived personal history, and an altered perception of reality. Distribution and expansion of identity can follow, resonating thematically with my own made-up, pan-beingist, pragmatic, self-developist stance. Spiritual crises initiate an opening to transformation. In many cases, it seems that this happens without the experiencer asking for it or knowing the profundity of what they may be getting into. Indeed, one of the key developments that people make in spiritually integrated therapy is to come to terms with and accept this process of change. It's almost as though you have no option but to let go of fearful resistance. You can't rescue yourself, and you can't be rescued by anyone else from this experience. In feeling all there is to feel, you realize that they are just feelings. None are good or bad that are not labeled as such by us. And they are all temporary. You realize that you are a process more than a state.